My golden child brother cheated with my wife, tried to steal my savings from bank, and got mom on their side, so I completely ruined their lives. Hey, everyone. Long-time lurker, first-time poster here. I've always considered myself someone who's got his act together, a stable guy with clear goals. But recently, my world's been turned upside down. Everything I thought I knew, my marriage, my family, and even my own instincts, has been thrown into doubt. It's like I've stumbled into a soap opera I never signed up for. Let me lay it all out and see if I'm losing my mind. So, here's the story. I'm 28 and married to Claire, 27. We've been together for 2 years, and until recently, I thought we had a solid thing going. I'm not someone who craves a picture-perfect romance. I've worked hard to build a good life, a successful career, a comfortable home, and a clear vision for the future. Claire seemed to fit seamlessly into that vision. She's smart, witty, and sharp enough to keep me on my toes. We felt like a team, the kind where trust isn't even a question. I'll never forget how she supported me when I lost out on a promotion I'd been chasing. "You'll get the next one," she said, her hand resting on mine. "You're unstoppable." At the time, I believed her. Now, I'm not so sure I even know who she is. Enter James, my younger brother, also 27. James is the kind of guy everyone adores. Charming, charismatic, and effortlessly likable. Growing up, he was the golden child. Teachers, girlfriends, even our parents doted on him. Meanwhile, I was the one grinding away, earning my stripes. I won't lie, maybe I was a little bitter. But we were close. James wasn't just my brother, he was my best friend. We had each other's backs through thick and thin, and that bond made his recent betrayal all the more gut-wrenching. When Claire and I got married, James got along with her right away. It didn't bother me, he's family. He'd drop by for dinners, crack jokes, and be his usual entertaining self. I figured Claire just saw him as my goofy younger brother. She's too smart for his smooth talker routine, I thought. And James would never cross a line like that, or so I believed. But then, his visits became more frequent. It wasn't just family dinners or weekend hangouts anymore. Suddenly, he was popping over during the week when I wasn't home. I'd come back from work to hear Claire casually mention, "Oh, James stopped by for lunch." At first, I shrugged it off. Cool, I guess. But then it started happening more and more. One evening, I came home early and found them on the couch, laughing over something on her phone. As soon as Claire noticed me, she locked the screen and her smile vanished. My gut churned, but I didn't say anything. Without proof, what's the point? Later that night, I asked casually, "So, what was so funny earlier with James?" Claire shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "Just a meme. Nothing serious," she said. But my instincts were screaming at me. Something was off. The next day, I decided to push a little. Over dinner I said, "James has been around a lot lately. Doesn't he have other things to do?" Claire rolled her eyes and laughed. "He's your brother. Don't be so dramatic. He just likes hanging out." Her response didn't sit right with me. People don't randomly hang out with married couples that often, especially midweek. Looking back, I realized there were signs I ignored. Claire had been restless lately, saying she wanted more out of life, that she felt trapped. I thought I was doing enough. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe James stepped in where I fell short. Not that it excuses anything, but it makes me wonder if she was searching for something I couldn't give. I called my best friend Eric that night. We've been tight since college, and if anyone could help me sort through this mess, it was him. "You're overthinking it," Eric said initially. "James is annoying, sure, but he's your brother. Claire's not the type to cross that line." "I don't know, man," I said. "Something about the way they've been acting, it's too familiar." Eric sighed. "Okay, let's say you're right. What are you going to do about it?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But if they're crossing the line, they're both out of my life." "Good," Eric replied firmly. "You don't deserve that kind of betrayal. Trust your gut, and keep your eyes open." Then came the barbecue, a simple family gathering that blew everything wide open. We were all in the backyard, grilling burgers, when one of my cousins joked, "Man, Claire and James are like two peas in a pod." Everyone laughed, but my jaw clenched. It wasn't just me noticing anymore. Since then, I've been watching. Not obsessively. I'm not some insecure kid who needs to track his wife's every move. But I'm not blind, either. The subtle glances between them, the inside jokes I'm excluded from, the way Claire defends James whenever I bring him up, it's all adding up. I've been playing it cool, letting them think I'm oblivious. But deep down, I know this is heading for a confrontation. They think I'll just sit back and take it? They're dead wrong. That's when I called Mark, a family law attorney and a trusted family friend. Mark's a shark, the kind of guy who doesn't just fight, he wins. I laid it all out for him, swallowing my pride as I spoke. I don't have concrete proof, I admitted, but my gut says something's going on. Mark listened carefully before saying, "We'll figure this out. But first, we need a plan." And that's where I'm at. Watching, waiting, and preparing for whatever comes next. The blood drained from Claire's face as she stared at the screen. Her confident facade shattered in an instant. The room was so silent that I could hear the ticking of the wall clock, each second stretching unbearably. "Explain," I said, my voice calm but ice cold. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, her lips trembling as she searched for words. "It's not what it looks like," she finally stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I raised an eyebrow, gesturing at the photos on the phone. "Oh? So you and James sneaking off to his apartment, spending afternoons laughing like a couple of teenagers, and looking like you're plotting something over coffee. That's nothing." Claire's hands trembled as she pushed the phone away. "It's complicated," she muttered. "No, it's really not," I snapped, leaning forward. "You either tell me the truth, or I'll assume the worst. And I promise you, Claire, I don't handle betrayal lightly." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't feel an ounce of pity. She had betrayed me, not just as a wife but as someone I thought was my partner. "It's James," she began hesitantly. "He's in trouble." I crossed my arms, my gaze boring into hers. "Trouble? What kind of trouble, Claire?" She hesitated, wiping her eyes. He got involved with someone, a guy named Victor Kane. It started as an investment opportunity, but it's gone wrong. James didn't know it was a scam at first, and now Victor's threatening him. "And that explains why you've been sneaking around with him?" I asked sharply. "Why you've been funneling money from our accounts to this con artist?" Her head shot up in shock. "How do you?" "Don't underestimate me," I cut her off. "I've been watching, Claire. I know about the money. I know about Victor. And I know that you and James have been lying to me for months." Claire's shoulders slumped as if the weight of her lies had finally crushed her. "I was trying to help," she said weakly. "James begged me not to tell you. He thought he could fix it if we just kept Victor happy long enough." I let out a bitter laugh. "Fix it? By dragging you, and my money, into his mess? Do you even hear yourself, Claire? You betrayed me for him." She reached for my hand, but I pulled back, standing up. "I'm sorry," she pleaded. "I didn't know what else to do. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trying to protect James." "Protect James?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You chose him over me. Your husband. You lied to me, stole from me, and made me feel like I was crazy for suspecting anything. How exactly am I supposed to believe a single word out of your mouth now?" Claire broke down, sobbing into her hands, but I didn't move to comfort her. My mind was already working, calculating my next steps. This wasn't just about Claire anymore. It was about James, Victor, and the mess they dragged me into. But one thing was clear, I wasn't going to let them destroy everything I'd built. "You've made your choices, Claire," I said finally, my voice cold and resolute. "Now I'm making mine. This ends today." Her tear-streaked face looked up at me, full of fear and regret, but I turned away. There was no room for sympathy anymore. I walked out of the kitchen and grabbed my keys. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But when it was, I'd make sure Claire and James understood exactly what happens when you betray me. I stopped by Eric's place before heading to James's apartment. Eric was an old friend, loyal, sharp, and most importantly, someone I could trust when things got messy. "What's up?" Eric asked as he let me in, noticing the tension written all over my face. I dropped into a chair, running a hand through my hair. "I need backup. Not physical, just someone to make sure I don't lose it." Eric nodded, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey without asking. "This about Claire and James?" I raised an eyebrow. "You knew?" He shrugged, handing me a glass. "Not exactly. But you've been on edge, and I've heard enough whispers to piece it together. What's the plan?" I laid it out, from the photos to the money trail to the scam James had fallen into. Eric listened quietly, his expression growing darker with every detail. "Jesus," he muttered when I finished. "Your own brother. That's low." I nodded, staring into my glass. I need to confront him. But I'm not walking into this blind. I want him to know I've got every piece of dirt on him, and that I'm not afraid to burn his life down if he pushes me. Eric smirked. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic. You sure you don't want me to come along? Just in case." I shook my head. "This is something I have to do alone. But knowing you've got my back if things go south? That means everything." Eric clinked his glass against mine. "You've got this. Just don't do anything you'll regret later." I drained the whiskey, set the glass down, and stood. "Regrets not on the table, Eric. Not anymore." James's apartment was in a shabby complex on the edge of town, the kind of place where people went when they didn't want to be found. I parked across the street, took a deep breath, and walked up to his door. When he opened it, his face went pale. "Oh. Hey. What are you doing here?" I shoved past him into the apartment, ignoring his weak attempt to block me. The place was a mess, empty beer bottles, takeout containers, and piles of unwashed laundry. It reeked of desperation. "We need to talk," I said, turning to face him. James scratched the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. "Look, if this is about Claire." "It's about everything," I cut him off, my voice cold. "The affair. The money. The scam. All of it." His head snapped up, his eyes wide. How do you?" "I know everything, James," I said, stepping closer. "I know about the secret account. I know about Victor Kane. I know how you've been using Claire to bankroll your little scheme." James backed away, his hands up defensively. "It's not what you think, man. Victor promised me." "Don't," I snarled, cutting him off again. "Don't stand there and try to justify this. You betrayed me. You used my wife, my money, and my trust. For what? A scam." He sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he mumbled. I laughed bitterly. "You didn't mean for it to go this far? That's your excuse? You knew exactly what you were doing, James. You just didn't think you'd get caught." He looked up at me, desperation etched into his face. "Please, I can fix this. I can get the money back." "No, you can't," I said firmly. "And even if you could, it wouldn't change what you've done." I pulled out my phone and showed him the evidence. Photos, bank statements, messages. His face turned ashen as he realized just how deep he was in. "I could destroy you with this," I said quietly. "And don't think for a second I won't. But first, you're going to tell me everything about Victor Kane. Every deal, every lie, every plan. You're going to give me the ammunition I need to take him down." James nodded shakily. Okay, I'll tell you everything. Just, don't go to the cops. Please." I leaned in close, my voice low and menacing. "You don't get to make requests, James. You lost that right the moment you decided to stab me in the back." As I left his apartment that night, I didn't feel triumphant. The weight of betrayal still hung heavy on my shoulders. But for the first time in weeks, I felt in control. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But when it was, James, Claire, and Victor Kane would all understand one thing. You don't mess with me and walk away unscathed. That night, I delivered the divorce papers myself. Claire opened the door, her face pale as she took in my calm, controlled expression. For a moment, she looked like she might try to play the victim again, her eyes welling up with tears. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling as she glanced at the envelope I handed her. "It's exactly what it looks like," I said evenly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "You wanted to start over, Claire? Here's your chance." She hesitated, staring at the papers like they were a loaded gun. "We can fix this," she whispered. "We can go to therapy, work through this." I laughed bitterly. "Work through it? You think therapy fixes theft? Infidelity? Betrayal? No, Claire. You burned this bridge to ash, and there's no rebuilding it." Her tears finally spilled over, but I didn't feel a shred of sympathy. Not after everything she'd done. "I've frozen all the joint accounts," I continued, my voice calm but cold. "You can't touch a cent of what's mine. And these," I said, tapping the papers in her hand, "are airtight. If you try to fight me on this, you'll lose everything. So I suggest you sign and move on. Her face crumpled, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of the woman I once loved. But that version of Claire was long gone, replaced by someone willing to stab me in the back for her own gain. "Why are you doing this?" she sobbed. I stared at her, my voice devoid of emotion. "Because you gave me no choice." Locking Claire out was one thing, but James was a different matter. His betrayal wasn't just personal, it was business. I couldn't let him crawl away and lick his wounds. He had to face the consequences. Mark helped me draft a lawsuit against James for fraud and theft. It wasn't just about the money he'd tried to steal, it was about sending a message. James had always been jealous of what I'd built, but now he'd see just how far out of his depth he really was. The process was slow, grueling, and emotionally draining, but it was worth every second. James tried to bluff his way out, claiming he had no idea about Victor Kane's schemes. But the evidence Mark and I had gathered was irrefutable. His fingerprints were all over every shady deal, every lie, every betrayal. When James finally broke and offered a settlement, I made it clear I wasn't interested. This wasn't just about money, it was about justice. The fallout from their betrayal rippled through every corner of my life. My family was divided, with some relatives urging me to forgive James and Claire, while others quietly distanced themselves from the drama. My mother called again, pleading with me to be the bigger person. "Family forgives," she said softly, as if that would somehow erase the damage they'd done. "Not this time," I replied firmly, hanging up before she could argue further. At work, I threw myself into my job with renewed focus, determined to rebuild what I could. My boss noticed the change almost immediately, nodding in approval during meetings as my numbers climbed back up. Work became my sanctuary, a place where I could channel my anger into something productive. Weeks later, I received a call from Mark. "Victor Kane's been arrested," he said, his voice triumphant. Turns out, James wasn't the only idiot he conned. The authorities were already building a case against him, and your evidence pushed it over the edge. I leaned back in my chair, a grim smile tugging at my lips. "Good. Let him rot." "And James?" Mark asked. "Let him deal with the mess he made," I replied. "I'm done cleaning up after him." In the end, I came out stronger. Not because of some cheesy redemption arc or self-discovery, but because I refused to let their betrayal define me. I rebuilt my finances, my career, and my life on my terms. As for Claire and James, they got exactly what they deserved. Claire was left broke, humiliated, and abandoned by the very man she'd risked everything for. James, once smug and cocky, now lived in the shadow of his failures, his reputation in ruins. Revenge wasn't about spite or malice, it was about justice. And when it was all said and done, I walked away with my head held high, leaving them to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. Because in the end, betrayal doesn't break you. It reveals who you really are. And me? I'm the kind of man who doesn't let anything, or anyone, tear him down. The moment Claire opened the door to the papers, she called me immediately. Her voice trembled, a mix of anger and desperation. "You're divorcing me," she hissed, as if it was a shocking betrayal. "You can't just throw everything away like this." I almost laughed at the audacity of it. "Throw everything away?" I repeated, my tone flat. "Claire, you did that the second you started sneaking around with James. The second you decided to take what wasn't yours. I'm just cleaning up the mess you made." She tried to guilt-trip me. That was Claire's go-to. She brought up our years together, the good times, as if that somehow erased the betrayal. "We can fix this," she begged, her voice cracking. "We can work through it." I cut her off, my voice firm and final. "No, we can't. You don't come back from this. Sign the papers, Claire, or don't. Either way, we're done." I hung up before she could respond. There was nothing left to say. Next, it was James's turn. Getting him fired from his cushy job was a good start, but I wasn't satisfied. He thought his charm would carry him forever, but I was about to make sure no one in his professional circle would trust him again. I reached out to a few contacts, people who knew James but didn't owe him anything, and laid out the truth. I didn't exaggerate or embellish, I just told them exactly what he'd done, everything. The affair. The stolen money. The betrayal. I even sent them the evidence Mark had gathered. James tried to interview for other jobs, but word spread quickly. No one wanted to hire a man who would betray his own brother. A week later, James called me. It was the first time I'd heard from him since our confrontation at his apartment. His voice was frantic, a mix of anger and desperation. "I can't get a job," he shouted. "You've ruined my reputation." I leaned back in my chair, letting his words hang in the air. "You ruined your reputation, James. I just made sure people knew the truth." "Come on, man, we're family," he pleaded. The word family set something off inside me. You don't get to use that word. You stopped being family the second you decided to stab me in the back. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said, his tone shifting to pathetic. "I was stupid. I made a mistake. A mistake." I shouted. "A mistake is forgetting to lock your car. What you did was calculated. You knew exactly what you were doing. And now you're paying for it." "Don't call me again, James," I said coldly. "We're done." I hung up and blocked his number. Whatever came next for him wasn't my problem. But dealing with them wasn't enough. I needed to rebuild. For too long, I'd let Claire's lies and James's betrayal consume me. Now, I was done with that. I started hitting the gym harder than ever. Every rep, every mile, every drop of sweat felt like taking back control. I threw myself into work, diving into projects I'd put off for months. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years, people I'd let drift away because I'd been too wrapped up in Claire's lies. It wasn't just about keeping busy. It was about proving to myself that I could move forward, that I could be better, sharper, stronger. One of those friends, Eric, said something that stuck with me. "You're not the guy I used to know, but in a good way. You're sharper, stronger." It felt good to hear that. It was like I was finally becoming the person I was meant to be. By the time the divorce was finalized, Claire had gone radio silent. She signed the papers without a fight, probably realizing she had no other choice. No more texts. No more calls. She disappeared. James slunk off into the shadows too. The last I heard, he'd moved out of town, probably hoping to escape the mess he'd made. Good. Let him run. Let him try to start over somewhere else. I didn't care anymore. They were ghosts to me now. Victor Kane, however, wasn't finished with them. Mark found out that Victor had been pressuring James and Claire for more money after the account was frozen. "Victor doesn't just let people walk away," Mark told me. "He'll squeeze them dry before cutting them loose." Part of me wanted to warn them, but I stopped myself. They chose to work with Victor. They chose to betray me. If Victor turned on them, that was their problem, not mine. Still, it was satisfying to imagine them scrambling to clean up the mess they'd created. Looking back, it's hard to describe how all of this changed me. I don't trust as easily anymore, but I don't see that as a bad thing. Trust is earned, not given. Loyalty isn't just expected, it's required. Claire and James thought they could tear me down, but all they did was remind me who I really am. So here I am now. Sharper. Stronger. Smarter. They tried to burn me, but all they did was light a fire under me. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: you can lose everything, but as long as you don't lose yourself, you can rebuild. And I'll be dongade if I let anyone try to take me down again. Final update. Hey, everyone. It's been a while. A lot has happened since my last post, and I figured it was time for an update. The financial fallout for my brother James didn't stop with the frozen account. Remember how Claire and James tried to set up that secret stash of stolen money? Well, the bank flagged the transfers, and since they were tied to fraudulent activity, both of them got hit with hefty fines. Claire managed to scrape together enough to pay her share, probably by selling everything she could. But James? He didn't have the funds. From what I've heard, he's been struggling to make the payments and is now dealing with debt collectors. The irony is almost poetic. He tried to take what wasn't his, and now he's drowning in bills he can't pay. Oh, and I recently found out through mutual contacts that James has officially left town. Apparently, he couldn't handle the shame of what he'd done and decided to start fresh somewhere else. Honestly, I think it's for the best. He burned every bridge here, professionally, personally, and within our family. The funny thing is, even though he's gone, his reputation still follows him. People talk, and his actions have become the kind of story that spreads fast. Wherever he goes, he'll have to carry the weight of what he did. If you'd asked me a few months ago how I felt about James, I would have said I hated him. But now, I don't feel anything. He's irrelevant. I don't need revenge or closure. I've moved on, and I've built a life where his existence doesn't matter anymore. That's the best part about karma. It doesn't need help. It takes care of things on its own. All I had to do was step back and let it work.